Hey, how's everyone doing? I am live for my first time. Nice to see you all. And I am waiting for Melissa to join us. Hi, Melissa.
Hello. Hi.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to see you and talk to you in person, face to face. Um,
Yeah.
well, I am so grateful for you putting such thoughtful um, videos and information and resources up on my page the past few days. And I know a lot of people have been asking how they can get involved, how they can, um, even if they might not be personally able to get into the streets, how they can support the movement.
hmm so I think for me, I've been doing this work since I was 14 years old, and throughout that time, I've been able to figure out where I'm best able to help. And I know for a fact I'm not a protester. I'm not the best on the streets. I'm extremely anxious. I'm also extremely scared of the police. So for me, being on the front lines, I'm not the most helpful there. But I do know that I'm really good at strategy, and I do know that I'm really good at storytelling. So being on the back end, helping organizers who are on the ground think through their movements and think through how to um, how to tell their stories in a meaningful way is something that I'm best able to do. So I think that, when we're doing this work, we really have to disengage from this idea that protesting is the only way to be involved, because the fact of the matter is there's so many ways to go about doing this work. One of my favorite stories from the civil rights movement is there was a Black woman, who fed the entire movement. That was her role. She would cook for Dr. Martin Luther King and everyone else who was doing the work. And that was her role. And it was very impactful because you have to eat, right? So I think that I've seen a myriad of ways that people have been helping, doing digital organizing, so sharing resources in that way. I've also seen a lot of people skill sharing. So if they're really good at like data organization, they'll say, I'll do this for free for an organization. Or they'll have their own organization's mass donation. So if they get like $10,000, they'll match up to 10,000. Um, Also things like, donating to individuals. And I think we'll talk about that later, but I
Yeah,
think, as well as donate to organizations, really big organizations, it's really important that we donate to individual folks on the ground so that we're meeting their basic needs. And also joining radical organizations, right? Like we can't do this alone. And it's really important that we're being accountable to organizations and being and just learning in community in that way. And also too, just listening and learning, right? I think a lot of folks think they just have to jump into the work, but the truth of the matter is learning, taking time to learn and being committed to learning the work is just as crucial as doing it.
I love that. Yeah, I love that you set up this mutual aid fund.
hmm
Um, Tell us more about that, about the work you do with that, and also how people can get involved in that.
So the mutual aid fund that I set up, it started off by me noticing that there were organizers on the ground who like they're doing all this work, but they don't have money to eat. They don't have money to go get back home. So it's like, okay, we have these people fighting for our lives, putting their lives on the line, but they can't eat. So it started off by me saying, like, anybody who was protesting tonight, let me help you. Let me provide you with some money. And mind you, I'm an unemployed college student, former college student. I just graduated, but so I'm using my money to send money to folks. So, and that's how it's been working, right? Like people who have no jobs, who have been using their unemployment checks to send money to protesters on the ground. And then I realized like a lot of people were sending me money so I could send to people. And I was like, okay, well, a lot of the funds right now are being kind of diverted from COVID-19 relief to the protesters on the ground. So my idea was, okay, while a lot of folks are still sending money to bail relief funds and things like that, let's actually congregate these funds to also send it to Black families and Black individuals who are still struggling. And so far, we've raised over $6,000, and we've sent money to a wide range of folks, people who have been homeless since the pandemic hit. and people who are raising money to support their doula services and their lifelong dreams. And I think what these mutual aid funds represent is the importance of community and what is possible when we come together when the state fails us at large. I think, a lot of us have adopted this notion of abolish police and defund the police, but we have to think about what's actually going to be there after, and what's going to be there is the people, our communities, people who are willing to support one another. And I think mutual aid funds are something that need to be around all year. It can't just be when there's a pandemic. And I think we need to be committed to supporting Black folks every day, even when we're not suffering. We need to be willing to, when we see a GoFundMe or a Venmo donation saying, I need to raise money for, my lifelong dreams, or I need money to pay rent, we need to be willing to send money to folks, because at large, we're being failed by the government every single day of our lives.
And I love what you organized in your school when you were in school, as an example of that, like how, so maybe how do you think, like you were talking about, like what we should be investing in, like how your experience working with your school influenced the way you think about what we should invest in?
Yeah, so I want to preface this by saying that I think what largely mobilizes folks is police brutality, is issues of state-sanctioned violence. But, when we say Black Lives Matter, we're not just talking about police brutality. We're also talking about all areas of life. And so for me, when I first started organizing, I got my start in my school district, the East Rockville Central School District. And what was occurring is that in 2005, our school board became a largely white school board, and they were basically leading a predominantly Black and Latino student population. So, and also a largely public school population. So the majority of the board were white men who were really there to gain money for their private schools. And so here we are, we have this large Black and Latino school district. And so from 2005 to still now, like, our budgets have not been allocated in a way that actually benefits the public schools. So my family and I, we moved to Spring Valley, New York when I was 5. So around 2005, 2004-ish. And so I went from K to 12 in this district. And from there, I literally saw the degradation of this district. So we went from having like a lot of resources when we were a majority white school district. And then like literally by the time I was a senior, our textbooks were like from the 1980s. We had literally no resources. We couldn't even use our football field because we couldn't afford to have a bleacher. And so like these are some of the things that like this was our reality. And of course, morale started to go down, of course, because we didn't have resources. Most folks are going to school and not even, receiving adequate education because we didn't have the funds to meet the needs of our immigrant student population. So this was our reality. And it was like, when we looked around as students, there wasn't really anything being done for us. And a lot of adults were speaking on behalf of us, but our stories weren't on the front lines. And so some of my peers and I, we organized this group called Stronger Students. And our goal was to put pressure upon the East Rockville, the school board itself. But we eventually partnered with some community leaders. And from there, we held a rally. And then we were able to then go to the New York State legislature and convince Governor Cuomo to allocate $3 million in funds to restart arts and music programs and full-day kindergarten. But it wasn't enough. And so recently the NAACP, the local NAACP here, was able to won a really landmark case for voting rights in the district. So now we're going to be able to allocate votes a lot better in the district so that we can have more representation on the board, so that we can hopefully get our budgets passed and receive more funds for our school district.
Wow. That is incredible, the work you've done, and also incredible how much work there still is to be done. And you said you moved here when you were 5. You were born and your family's from Haiti, right? How do you feel Haitian culture has influenced your perspective on what's happening right now, and what are the other kind of influences you feel are shaping this movement?
I think so. Me being Haitian influences everything that I do, from the micro to the macro. And to focus on the macro, I think when I think about the Haitian Revolution and our politics and what we've done, even before 1804 when we won our revolution, what we've been able to do is always thinking about how our movement seemed to be inclusive, right? When I think about the Haitian Revolution, it was a largely male-dominated movement. And I think looking at our movement now, I think a lot of times we do tend to focus and mobilize for cisgender heterosexual men. And when we do that, what happens is we're not necessarily thinking about meeting the needs of the most marginalized in our communities. So going back to what we were saying earlier about how Black Lives Matter in every facet of life, Black women have like the highest mortality rates during pregnancy. We don't have fair education practices. So when we think about, okay, how do we meet the most marginalized, the needs of the most marginalized, that means we do have to focus on the needs of Black women, on the needs of queer folks in our communities. It can't just be a cis-het dominated movement. And so when I look at the Haitian Revolution, I always think to myself, if Haitian women and Haitian queer folks had been leading this movement, I feel like we would be in a totally different place now because we would have been focused on meeting the needs of the most marginalized. And I also think, too, when we think about Haiti, I also think about global solidarity. When Haiti won its revolution, we didn't just stop there. Like we went out and we helped other folks win the revolution as well. Some of the most immediate examples I think about is Haiti helping Venezuela with its revolution. And from there, we were still, I think from there, it created a history of Haiti and Venezuela standing in solidarity. And Venezuela and Haiti still have a really strong relationship. Haiti also helped the Greeks win the revolution. It was the first country to even recognize Greece independence. So I think, when we think about Black liberation, it can't just be within the United States context. Black folks are not free until everyone is free. And so that, like, when I say it informs everything I do, it really does. And I think we have a lot to learn from Haiti as a political giant, and also just as a country that has gone through this process of revolution.
And do you feel that we're in a revolution right now?
I think because I've studied the Haitian Revolution, I know that, revolution is not necessarily an event, it's a process. So when I look at where we are now, I don't want to necessarily jump and say we're in a revolution. I want to say that we're in a process that we're witnessing, the masses really coming to understand how these systems work to oppress all of us. And so I think we're witnessing we may be on the precipice of a revolution, but I don't necessarily think that we're there yet. Because I also think too that because we're not necessarily grounding ourselves in history, and not everyone, of course, but I think that we kind of romanticize revolution. We don't really know what it is until you actually study places that have undergone a revolution. It's not pretty, it's not fun, and it takes a lot of work and it takes a long, long time. Like I like to say that I think Haiti is still in a revolution, and it didn't start, it didn't start in the 19th century. It actually started when Columbus landed on the island. And so I think that we have to think of revolution as a long-term narrative rather than an event that you go to and then you leave, and the next day you're at a new world.
And what are the arts that are inspiring you at this moment and you think are coming out of the movement and that are inspiring the movement?
So the first person I have to mention is Beyonce. Beyonce influences so much of what I do. She doesn't just, she has a form of self-care for me in terms of watching her work, but I think what Beyonce reminds me of is that it's so important that as Black folks, we do archive our lives. I think for so long, our stories have been told for us, or we have been entirely erased out of history. And what Beyonce does so vividly and so proactively is she's always thinking of how do I represent my life in a way that speaks to not only my experience, but take the experience of an entire group of people. And when I think about, archiving our lives, I mean, every single way. So writing in your journal, taking photos, taking videos. A Black woman was recently killed. Her name was Oluwatoyin. And I think, usually when Black people die, it's usually like mugshots that are circulated or a random photo that doesn't really represent the three-dimensionality of who we are as people. And what she did is she actually archived her life. She took these beautiful pictures, and those are the pictures that we have been seeing circulating around social media. And so I think for me, as a Black person, as someone who's always, facing the possibility of facing death, I'm always thinking of how can I control my narrative even after I'm long gone. And I think archiving our lives is a way to do that, is a way to make sure that, you know, we are keeping ourselves alive, even if we're no longer here on this planet. Some other things too is this movie called What Happened, Miss Simone. It's about Nina Simone's life. And I really like that movie. I like to revisit it every now and then because I think Nina Simone is a perfect example of the sacrifices we have to make in order to fully embrace this movement. You know, Nina Simone's career really went down the drain when she embraced the civil rights movement. And I think it's an example not only to myself as an organizer, but to celebrities and folks with massive amounts of wealth to understand that if we're going to embrace this movement, it takes a lot of sacrifice and it really takes a commitment that can't be unwavering. I also think too, for me, Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra, those shows really inform our politics because I really do think, you know, they remind me of systems. They remind me of fighting against white supremacy and fighting against capitalism and all these systems. Because it reminds me that it is a long-term game, right? It's not just something, again, that you wake up and you go to the revolution and then you leave and it's over. It's something that you have to be committed to. And it's something that, you know, is traumatic. And it's something that a lot of young folks are engaging in at this moment. And I think, you know, those two shows, Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra, they do a really good job of contextualizing what it means to be of service to a movement. And so, yeah, those are the art pieces that inform our work.
I love that. And how can we learn in community from each other?
Yeah. I mean, I think because we live in a capitalist society, we're always being told that we need to be individuals rather than, you know, living within a community. And so I think our first inclination would be to open up a book and read it ourselves. But if we're reading, like, you know, texts by Black radical, like really radical Black folks, these texts are complex, right? Like, you're not going to get it in 2.5 seconds. And you're also not going to get it by reading it by yourself, because sometimes your analysis may not be on point, right? And what I found for myself is that I always find that I reach new ideas, or like I understand things better when I go over them with a friend. And it's in those moments where, like, they're hyping you up and they're telling you, like, yeah, like, you're right, that makes so much sense, that you're able to arrive to new ideas and think through, you know, how is this text not only telling me something about history, but also how is this text allowing me to analyze this current moment to arrive to a new place that we haven't even thought of before? So that can manifest in a multitude of different ways, right? I think the first thing is joining a book club or joining an organization, or, you know, bringing this to your friends and saying, hey, I'm reading this book and this is how I'm thinking about the world differently now. And so, you know, I think learning in community is a really crucial thing that we all have to get comfortable with. And we have to be comfortable with not always getting it right and trusting that our community members will guide us to where we need to be.
I love that. And yeah, it's especially hard during this moment, I think, to be from one another. And it is amazing. Every time I end up in virtual community, it's such a like emboldening feeling for sure.
I mean, I'm wondering for you, Natalie, I noticed that you recently posted about how you weren't really sure about the idea of defunding the police, and then you embraced it. How was that process for you, and what helped you arrive to that?
Well, I think it's really been interesting because I think it's been a time where, as you know, middle-aged woman, I have only recently learned to really trust my gut and like say what I feel and express myself. And this was a moment where my gut was not right. My gut it made me feel really scared and uncomfortable to think about defunding the police, because I've enjoyed a life of feeling safe from the police. And it really took me listening, like you were saying, and hearing what experiences were like for people who don't look like me, to understand that, like, I can't enjoy that privilege if my neighbor and friend and family does not. Like, that is not okay for me. that cannot be my conscience. But it was unusual because I've just gotten to a point where I'm like, if I feel something's wrong, I'm going to say it's wrong. If I feel something's uncomfortable, I'm going to get out of that situation, you know, which is, I think, an alarming, it's like an alarming thing to feel, you know, to get that shaken, but also a beautiful thing to have your mind changed and have your awakening, you know, to be opened to new possibilities and to learn people's experience. What do you think the best way is that we can commit to create change?
I think the best way is to listen, is to follow the leadership of the people on the ground and the people who have been proactive in building the infrastructures for us. You know, I think about the people that I've been working with and the people who I've been seeing lead it is young people. It's young Black women, it's young queer folks, young trans folks. And it's important that we are willing to follow the direction and listen to them, right? Because they have the answers. They're rooted in Black feminism. They're rooted in these theoretical practices, and they're bringing it to life. And the way that they're going about leading, at least in my experience and the folks that I've been working with, it's something that's rooted in community care and understanding that we all have different needs, and how do we meet them? How do we all prioritize our self-care? And how do we also show up for each other in a way that's really meaningful? So I think the first thing is to listen, is to be committed to learning. And I think, you know, too, like integrating that learning into every aspect of your life. So for me, I received a large part of my political education through Twitter and Instagram, right? Like I've been learning since I was unlearning and learning new things since I was 14. And a large part of that was following people on Twitter and Instagram that were providing me with new perspectives. So not just about like, you know, Black life, but also about disability and fat phobia and all these different concepts that I had never heard about. I had never even thought about. But now I'm able to approach the work with so much more nuance and an approach that encompasses so many people. And the other thing too, I think, you know, as we're embracing this idea of defunding the police and abolishing the police, it's also thinking about, okay, how do I also abolish the carceral mindset that we've been taught to adopt, right? Like a lot of us, we do operate in a way that polices others. Like we don't like, a lot of us don't have a compassion for human life in the way that we should. And so, yes, like we should be working towards defunding the tangible thing, but it's also like, how do we move in more with more compassion towards one another? How do we actually bring the theory to our most intimate relationships? How do we use that theory to analyze what's happening to us and also to change the relationships we have with one another? Because I think once you change it at home, it's a lot easier to really implement that practice on a macro scale and really start thinking about how do we implement these practices into our political systems, into the things that will govern the way that we live and relate to one another.
Oh, I love that so much, man. If I knew what you knew at 21, a lot different. So in awe. How did you get into this work at 14?
So I don't know if you remember, but there was a hashtag called Bring Back Our Girls. And it was about 200 Nigerian girls who had been kidnapped in Nigeria. And I mean, I just remember at the time I wasn't really aware of what was driving me to this issue, but I remember I wrote a letter to my principal and I said, hey, I think we need to do something about this. We need to get involved some way. And, you know, she was very kind in the way that she gave me permission to host a fundraiser and skip a whole day of class to teach folks about how.
Oh no.
My mom. But basically it was a really great it was a really great experience to tie, you know, what was happening domestically to the rest of the world. But now that I've read more Black feminist texts, I understand that what was driving me to that issue was my identity as a Black woman. It was the fact that I could see myself in these Black girls that were striving to receive an education. And so for me, looking back, I'm like, of course I was drawn to this issue. You know, I saw myself in these people. This could have been me. So what drove me and what's always grounded me in this work is Black women, is issues related to Black folks. And it's not only because, you know, I look like them and these issues could easily be happening to me, but it's also because I believe that if we focus on the most marginalized within our society, we will be able to meet the needs of everyone else. When we start very narrow, we're able to broaden out and meet the needs of everyone. So if a Black woman has universal health care, that means everyone else will also have universal health care. That means the poor white person who lives in Wisconsin will also have health care as well. So grounding myself in Black feminism and work that focuses on Black people is really helpful for expanding outward.
I'm going to look at, seems like there's some questions here. Let me see
Okay.
it. There's Melissa, you inspire me to be a better person, from Clarissa Sanchez. I don't know, maybe none of, how can we go about protesting safely with the coronavirus?
I mean, to be quite honest, we are putting our lives on the line. Literally, we are. How to go about doing it safely, it really is to do as much as you can, right? So it's wearing your mask at all times, making sure that that if you have gone protesting, that you are isolating yourself for 2 weeks, and to make sure that, like, if you do have like vulnerable people at home, that you are keeping a distance, right? Because community care is not only, you know, going out and fighting for the state of Black folks across the country. It's also making sure that, again, in your most intimate relationships, you're also taking care of your people. I see someone, my friend in the comments, wash your hands, sanitize your hands, and get tested. Yeah, get tested. But I think it's a risk, and if you're immunocompromised, just make sure that you're staying home and you're helping out from home.
Okay, there's someone who asked, how can we center Black voices and amplify Black voices in an encouraging and trauma-informed way?
Ooh, okay. I think to do that, the first thing, one, is to read texts by Black people and making sure that, like, you, like, the way that you're moving through the world is grounded in something that is backed up by theory and the practices of our ancestors, right? And I think the other thing too is making sure that you are going to social justice spaces. So, like, you are surrounded by community. Because I think the way that I learned how to do this was to actually surround myself by people who did, like, use ground rules and who were very intentional about, you know, making sure that everyone's identities were respected in that space. Facilitation and things like that, it is a practice that we have to master. And so I think seeing it first and being in those spaces to know how it feels to be fully respected is, like, the first step in actually knowing how to center Black voices and lead and take care of those voices in a trauma-informed way.
Awesome. Okay, someone's asking, is there any advice you can offer for current student leaders?
The advice that I would offer is to start from an issue that impacts you, that you see yourself in, an issue that you know very well. What Black feminism teaches us is we are the experts of our own experiences. No one can tell it for us. So making sure that every issue that you join, that you're able to see a part of yourself in it as well. And I think too is, like, stand firm in your beliefs, but don't necessarily be unwilling to learn, to unlearn and learn new things, right? Because we are living in a colonized society, so it's important that we're recognizing that a lot of things that we grew up understanding is not necessarily the whole truth, and there are a lot of things that we do that aren't necessarily the right way of doing things. So it's important to be committed to unlearning as well as learning new things.
So some people are asking what the most meaningful way to support Black Lives Matter.
The most meaningful ways. I think some of the most tangible ways is to donate money to individuals as well as grassroots organizations. But I would say the most sustainable way is to integrate a lot of these practices into your daily lives. So making sure that you are reading texts by Black authors on a daily, right? Like texts that will actually enrich your understanding of Black life in the United States as well as globally. I also think too is making a commitment to actually interrogate yourself every day. And you know, this doesn't just go for white folks, it also goes for non-Black people and Black people, right? Like we also have to analyze and interrogate well, why do we only favor like light-skinned Black folks? Why do we only favor really skinny folks? Why do we only favor people who are able-bodied? These are all things that we have to be committed to unlearning so that we can make sure our movements are as inclusive as possible. So I think tangibly it's money, but sustainably it's integrating and unlearning and learning into your everyday life.
And what are some radical organizations that you would recommend?
I would recommend for like the Black folks watching this, Black Youth Project 100. I would also recommend thinking about the Audre Lorde Project, which is focused on queer folks. I'm drawing a blank, but those are the two that come to mind. Also, I have one. An organization that's really been helping recently is Nourish New York City. They've been providing supplies to folks on the front lines in New York City. With money, with PP&E, with educational supplies, and also now with therapy. So if any of you are in New York City or hoping to support an organization in New York City, I would support Nourish New York City. It's being led by a Black woman, and a lot of young Black folks are working on that project as well as myself. So really important.
And then someone asked what books to read.
I got y'all. So the first book that I would recommend, I don't know if you can see if it's backwards, but it's called How We Get Free, Black Feminism and the Combahee River Collective. This book really like snatched me up and got me together because, you know, I think a lot of times when we get into this work, we do things without necessarily understanding how it's tied to theory. And this book really helped to contextualize a lot of my actions and also expose me to a lot of new ways of thinking about how to move in community with each other. Really great book. Really recommend. The other one I would recommend is Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Davis. Anything by Angela Davis, really. But this book is really important because it really goes into how the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States is tied to the movement for Palestine. You know, how the Black struggle is an international struggle and why we need to build solidarity with people across the globe to make sure that we are prioritizing the most marginalized everywhere, and not moving in a state of understanding that we are exceptional just because we live in the United States. This other book, I would recommend Edwidge Danticat, who's a Haitian author. And I think she's just great, especially if you're Haitian. But if you're not Haitian, it really helps to understand how these issues impact our most intimate experiences and relationships. And this other book I'd recommend is Walking on Fire by Beverly Bell. It tells the stories of Haitian women and the tactics they use to survive in Haiti. And I think the reason why this book is so important is it really contextualizes how we can resist in small ways, but really impactful ways as well. Because I think a lot of folks, we focus on doing big actions, but, you know, these women are like resisting in ways that you can't even see with the naked eye, but it's still impactful and it still leads to the resistance and incremental ways. So I would recommend those books.
And we'll put a list of that on IG stories tomorrow so that everyone can see it if they didn't get that down, because I'm seeing a lot of people being like, what's the name of that author? But this is so wonderful. Thank you so much for all.
Thank you.
Give me so much hope. You and your peers who are leading this movement, and I'm so grateful. And I wish you safety and thriving and good, you know, and joy and rest within all of this hard work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Thank you for extending your platform to me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I really appreciate your time. And everyone who's been watching, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And for your thoughtful questions. The ones of you that had thoughtful questions and weren't just like writing ridiculous stuff, but most.
I see people calling you Padme.
That's my Star Wars name. That's friendly. But thank you all for joining, and thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Natalie.
See you soon. We'll keep following you.
Okay. Bye.